Now, if you're anything like me, then from time to time you like to sit down and watch some videos about manga. You know how I know that? You're doing it right now. And with the majority of manga content feels like it's all about, here's what I bought, here's what I'm adding to my collection all the time 24/7. Today, let's cleanse our palates and talk about some manga I've been reading. It's been a minute since I've done one of these manga reading logs, so I figure what better opportunity than to do one than today. So hopefully you guys enjoy this video talking about the manga I've been reading so far in 2025. There are some great ones I cannot wait to talk about. Of course, if at any point in this video you find yourself enjoying it, please leave a like and subscribe for more manga videos just like this. But without any further ado, let's start talking about the great manga I've been reading so far this year. Alright, so one of the first things I did to start off the new year was to start off a brand new manga collecting and reading, and that is going to be none other than Trillion Game. This is the brand new manga illustrated by one of my favorite artists ever, Ryuichi Ikegami. And the actual author of this series, Riichiro Inagaki, I believe I'm pronouncing that right, I had never even heard of until I actually looked it up. I was like, oh, this is the guy who writes Dr. Stone and also wrote Eye Shield 21, which I feel like are both series that are overshadowed by the massive names that are drawing the manga, obviously, with Yusuke Murata, Eye Shield 21, and the immensely talented Boichi illustrating Dr. Stone. And before I started reading this series, I thought, you know, Trillion Game might be another series that falls into this category of manga by this dude who gets overshadowed by the very talented artist they're doing it with, but I'm pleased to say that is not the case here. And don't get me wrong, the artwork that we're getting from Ikegami here is still absolutely top class, if not some of the best we've gotten from him as far as the details, the facial expression, and the distinctness of the character designs as well is some of the best he's ever given us. But I gotta say, the actual story and concept of this manga is what I find most interesting. Basically about these two guys. One is this very timid computer geek who's an IT whiz, and his old classmate who is the super confident, smooth-talking, almost I want to say con man, and they kind of team together with this life goal of making $1 trillion. And just seeing how these two characters complement each other as they work towards this goal is super interesting. Now, I've only read this first volume here, and I already have extremely high praise for it. I have the next 2 volumes in my cart right now, ready to click check out, so I'm excited to keep on reading this one. I'm sure it's going to continue to be immensely interesting just as this first volume was, and honestly, I can't wait. Now, on the contrast of a brand new manga publication that I've been reading, the next manga series I've been reading this year is an oldie but a goodie. That is Blackjack by Osamu Tezuka. Now, you guys, if you've been watching the channel, you know I've been collecting this series. It has not been cheap, but if you watch the channel, then you should also know that Tezuka is my number 1 or 2 favorite manga creator of all time. It flip-flops every waking minute, but Blackjack, I've only read the first 2 volumes of. This is the volume 2, the PX exclusive hardcover that is very hard to find, but I was able to track it down recently. So if you're not familiar with Blackjack, it's basically a manga series that is a compilation of short stories. Each chapter is its own kind of standalone story about this master surgeon named Blackjack. He is an unlicensed surgeon, but he is extremely talented that also charges a pretty penny for his professional services. Now, one thing that makes this series very interesting is that Osamu Tezuka, I believe, actually was going to medical school before he started doing manga full-time, and obviously with Blackjack being a manga about surgery and medicine, his passion for that field and knowledge really shines through and makes this a super interesting one. Now, I will say that I absolutely hate medical stuff. I am super squeamish about blood, heart stuff, and surgery, even though I read a lot of gory manga. When all the blood is related to real-life, realistic situations, that's when I start to get a little queasy. It's actually funny because the first chapter in this second volume here is about this guy who, there's an earthquake, has an IV in his arm, and the needle snaps and starts going through his bloodstream towards his heart. You can see it on the cover there. I actually had to skip this one, just had to tap out, could not take it. But the stories that I actually could stomach from this volume are just badass awesome every single time. A really sad one in here as well that I really enjoyed, but yeah, I cannot wait to keep on reading Blackjack. It's been a while since I read the first volume, but I'm officially back on the train, loving this series. The next series I've been reading this year is none other than The Fable. If you guys remember my manga haul from a few weeks ago, you'll know I picked up volume 4 and or omnibus 5, volumes 7 through 10 of The Fable, and I read them recently. and I'm still absolutely loving this manga. Now, within these 4 volumes that I've read of the Fable so far this year, we kind of start and wrap up a mini arc where our main character Sato and someone else go into the woods where he can re-hone his skills, his instincts for being an assassin by going into nature. And after that, we also kind of start our newest arc, which is this group of, I guess you could call them scammers, who target young people who are spoiled, follow them throughout their lives into their 20s, and then when the moment is right, they strike, they blackmail them for all they've got. I'll be honest, I wasn't totally sold on the concept of that new arc as I was reading the first couple chapters in it, but as it's gone on, as I've read a couple more volumes of it, I'm really enjoying it. And I'm finally caught up to a point where our main character Sato, the assassin, who's kind of, hiding out, laying low in our series, is kind of getting drawn into the whole scheme. So I'm very curious to see how he's going to interact with these new characters they've set up and this whole operation they've got going on. Now, the next manga that I read to completion this month is one from the horror genre, which is a genre that I absolutely love in video games and movies, but when it comes to manga, I surprisingly have not read a lot from it. Of course, the manga I'm talking about is a Junji Ito series I'm sure you've heard of called Gyo. This is the 2 volumes put out by Pulp or Viz Media in these beautiful embossed editions. Picked these up for, again, not a low price, but I'm still glad to have these finally on the shelf. Now, Junji Ito is a manga creator who I feel like, for as much stuff as he gets in English, is a pretty polarizing creator in the manga community, probably for that very reason that he just has so many series constantly coming out. I feel like people think he's putting out the exact same series over and over again and kind of taking the shine off of some really underrated, talented horror authors that we don't see a lot of stuff from. And to be honest, I can't really weigh in on either sides of that argument because this is actually the second ever series I've read from Junji Ito, and I haven't read a lot of horror to know who's out there regardless. But putting all of that aside, Gyo is a manga that I found myself really enjoying. After hearing some people say it was kind of mid, honestly, I thought it was badass. Now, one of my favorite subgenres in horror is body horror, and boy oh boy, is there enough to tide you over in this series. Basically about what people believe to be some sort of disease that causes these fish to start growing legs and coming on land and just terrorizing people, but I won't spoil anything. That's not exactly correct. Eventually, these parasites take over humans, make them these big bloating beings full of gas that help them move around, and it's absolutely disgusting. I mean, they talk about the smell, this horrid smell so often in this manga, and just looking at the artwork, you can almost smell it. And again, I don't want to spoil too much, but there's also a segment in the second volume of this series where there's this circus that's, I guess you could say, utilizing this gas and these parasites. It is just like straight up out of a nightmare fever dream. That's how vivid this part of the manga is, and really the manga in general. Now, the artwork is fantastic. Personally, I wasn't a huge fan of the direction the story went. It felt kind of basic, and as it kind of took a turn from horror into more sci-fi, it started to kind of lose me, but the series is only 2 volumes. It's pretty short. It held my attention throughout, and overall, I had a pretty great time with it. And the last amazing manga series that I've been reading this year that I want to talk about today in this video comes from, similar to Tezuka, one of my other 2 favorite manga creators of all time. That is the newest series from Taya Matsumoto titled Tokyo These Days. Actually, right before I sat down to record this video, I read volume 2 and volume 3, which is the entirety of this series into 3 volumes. And man, this is just such a special manga, as most of Taya Matsumoto's series are. This series follows our main character named Shiozawa, who is a manga editor who created a manga magazine that was full of these amazing creatives, and it, of course, flopped financially. It was axed, and then he ended up quitting his job. And the story follows this manga editor as he goes around reconnecting with these creators as he tries to make his dream manga self-publication that is full of creativity, in contrast to the type of by-the-numbers, surefire hit manga that are really dominating the industry in this current age. Now, whether it be a book about writing or a movie about making movies, when it comes to those kinds of things, it's often where you can really feel the artist, really putting their ideas right in front of you about their own creativity. And I feel like that is definitely the case here for Taya Matsumoto, as obviously a manga author making a series about making manga. I feel like he not only sets the bar for the abstract and creative you can find in contemporary manga, but he somehow manages to rise above that bar, who interestingly enough is a mangaka who has seen immense success throughout his career, not only in Japan or in the United States, but like Canada, France, all over the world really. So you kind of get both sides of it. Somebody who is continuously pushing the bar with their creativity, but has also seen his fair share of commercial success. So those kind of things coming into this series combining, I think was super interesting. And the typical things that make Taya Matsumoto's manga series so good are also present here. The world feels super lived in, the art is amazing, the characters and the things they go through are very relatable and heartfelt. And yeah, Tokyo These Days just manages to be another super impactful, creative, unique, and overwhelmingly enjoyable series by the legend Taya Matsumoto. If you haven't read any of his manga, you never heard of this guy, check his stuff out. I recommend Ping Pong, Sunny, number 5 is my personal favorite of his, and I'm glad to say that Tokyo These Days is right in line with some of his best work. Absolutely love this one. Anyways guys, that's going to do it for this video going over the great manga that I've been reading so far in 2025. Hopefully you enjoyed this video, got some good recommendations. Make sure if you've been reading anything good lately, leave them down in the comments below. I'll check them out, see if anything's interesting. We can continue the discussion down in the comments. Of course, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe for more manga videos just like this. But yeah, this has been ThePromG. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. And as always, hope to catch you in the next one.